Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Southern Needs Podcast, the show where I talk about books and only books and everything book related. Today, I am joined by Mr. John Graham. He's a former Navy SEAL. Uh, he is a UC Berkeley PhD graduate, a professor at emeritus at UC Irvine, and is a world-class expert in international trade and negotiations. And at UCI, he co-founded the Center for Citizens Peace Building in 2001, and his academic publications have garnered several awards. He currently has books in print on peace-related topics with international business, multi-generational families, drug policy, and he has also written a major historical novel involving World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam War, as well as two children's books. He has also advised Fortune 500 companies and government institutes following the U.S. Peace Institute and the U.S. Marine Corps. And his writing has been a subject to multiple interviews, as well as being interviewed by Smithsonian, the Wall Street Journal, NBC, ABC, Fox News, BBC, and NPR. And today he's here. He's going to share a little bit more about the books that he has come out with and share a little bit more about his writing journey. So, John, thank you so much for taking time to come on the podcast today. I'm really looking forward to hearing your story, and welcome to Southern Reads.
Yeah, I'm certainly happy to be here. The one thing you didn't get in my bio is you didn't say anything about my trip to Auburn in 1975. It's not in my bio. You went to Auburn.
Yes,
Yes.
I went there, and um that's interesting. You went back in 1975. What was that
Yeah.
space like for you back then, going to Auburn at that time?
Well, just real quick, I was stationed in Florida at the time, and one of my Navy buddies took me up to his house in Auburn. This was 1975, and he was very proud of the university. And the Alumni Association had sent him a 45 record of the end of the 1972 football game with Alabama. I think the nickname is Punt Alabama Punt. And so I listened to that. That was pretty cool. He also took me on a trip down the little river, a tubing trip. That scared the hell out of me because there were a couple of suck holes going down that river and we got past them. But anyway, my point is, I had a really good time and felt the hospitality of you folks in Alabama. And my question for you before you start asking me questions, which was the better game? Um, the 2013 game or the 1972 game? They were both exciting finishes.
Hmm. I will say the more modern one because that's the one I remember the most
Okay.
from. That was kind of peak Auburn football for me, I think. That was when they were really in their prime and they really were good at that point. I have to go there, but they've had some lucky plays after that, but nothing can beat 2013. It was
Okay. I
mm,
figured you'd vote that way. I haven't seen that video, but anyway, go ahead now. I just wanted to throw that in.
oh, it's a really good game. I highly suggest you check it out. It'll get your heart racing. Um but yeah, you've been able to write. So what I found really interesting is that you have been able to write books that kind of span multiple genres and kind of tackle different topics. You've talked about uh historical events like World War II and the Korean and Vietnam War. You've also been able to talk kind of political genres as well and talk about real life issues. And then you've turned around to two children's books too to kind of make it to be more PG. When you're writing these different books, do you have like a preferred one that you really resonate towards more, or do you just kind of write different genres just to see where your creativeness really shines the most?
Sure. My first book I wrote in 1984 is about negotiating with Japanese and was written for executives. And that got me kind of into the book writing mode. And have a book on negotiating with Chinese and people in other countries, and I have a number of professional books. Um, including a textbook on international marketing. But I always wanted to write a novel, and I'd been collecting information about that for about 20 years. It's in part based on my experiences in the Navy. It isn't a autobiography, but there's parts of it that are. And so I went ahead and started that, and I finished it pretty quickly. And so that's probably my favorite medium because what I'm trying to do with all my books is teach peace. And so that includes the business books where we do research and we're teaching people how to get along better at the negotiation table in business, but also in diplomacy. And my book on multi-generational living, I did with my sister, and now the third edition is with my daughter. And that's to keep peace in the family. And one of the kids' books, the one about the squirrel burglar, I did with my sister. My other sister is an artist, so I co-authored that with her. She came up with the story, and I kind of filled in the blanks and wrote in it. But they're all doing the same thing. We're trying to teach peace. And probably my favorite one is the one I've been promoting the most recently. It's called Inventive Negotiation. And there's a website, inventivenegotiation.com, which has a lot of information on it. But anyway, that's what I've been trying to do, and starting in 1984.
So with these books, you've also been able to come out with, you talk about really serious topics and you kind of share a lot of historical aspects to them. When you're writing them, do you do any research? Do you do any interviews with people that may have had kind of a more historical knowledge on the topics, or how do you go about researching when it comes to the books that really tackle with real life issues?
Yeah, I try to do field work. I talk to people that are experts in the area. Uh, and, I've basically spent the last 40 years or so doing research for books and articles. And so I enjoy that process. Probably my favorite example is part of Charlotte's War. Um, the historical novel takes place in Haiphong Harbor in Vietnam. And what I needed to find out was how fast the river goes by the docks. And so I was lucky enough to be in that area with my business students. And I went to Haiphong and I actually measured how fast the river was moving uh, uh, past the docks. So that was kind of fun. But, talking to people, talking to friends, uh, talking to people I know, as well as doing the book work and going to places.
Was there anything from doing your research that stood out to you as really memorable or something that you were just really surprised to learn about?
Oh boy. Yeah, I'm surprised to learn all the time. I guess one of the things that surprised me was, my one of my academic fields, probably the most important one, is international negotiation. And if you lightly read the uh, on that topic, you learn that Kissinger is known as a great negotiator. Henry Kissinger as a great international negotiator. And when I got deeper into it, I learned that he's an awful international negotiator. He tried three different times to negotiate settlements in Vietnam, and he failed all three times. And the reason he's such a terrible negotiator is he lies or lied during negotiations about his positions. The guy I worked for at the time, Richard Nixon, also lied. I can't forgive Nixon for doing that as president, but Kissinger, I can forgive a little bit because in his background, he grew up in Nazi Germany. He was a Jew growing up in Nazi Germany. And so there are a lot of situations where he had to lie to get by, but he transferred that to his diplomacy and actually did a terrible job. That my position on that is supported by others, but it's basically unpopular. But if you read his bio, and so there are two or three biographies of him, which I've read. They all talk about it.
So when you're doing, a lot of your writing has garnered so many wants of discussions, and so many people have actually reached out to you. You've been on numerous different platforms from Smithsonian, the Wall Street Journal, and then you've done all the major news, what I would say the big TV networks too, as well as for your interviews. How does it feel that your work and your writing is garnering this much attention and that so many people are hearing about your writing and the topics that you're discussing?
Well, it's very satisfying. It's fun. I was interviewed by Tom Broke on Channel 4 News one night back in the 80s. I had done my dissertation comparing how Japanese and Americans negotiate. And in the 80s, Japan was on top of the world, so to speak. And so I got a lot of phone calls, particularly then. But that interview was basically I said Americans need to learn Japanese so we can do a better job selling things there. The Japanese that come here speak English, so that was my argument back then. But it's satisfying. It's getting the word out. Um, uh, the books do that, but the interviews are also fun, like this one. I get to talk about Auburn.
No, I think in this day and age, being openly able to discuss about these political issues is obviously different than what it was back even, 10 years ago. Uh, I think 10 years ago, people weren't really as vocal about speaking on these tough topics. And then now people are more open, but it's more judgmental. People tend to have more of a harsh response rate when they hear something that they don't agree with. And I can, with these books, you talk about so many numerous topics in there. You talk about drug policy, international business, peace related topics. And, people have all kinds of different reactions. How do you balance personal opinions versus factual statements when it comes to making a claim when it comes to maybe something related to politics?
Yeah, that's tough sometimes. I usually look for evidence to support my position. As a career academic, when we do research on topics like negotiation or corruption, that's another one of my favorite. Corruption in business, that's another one of my favorite topics. We do the research, and then three people, the journals send our papers out to three critics, and they come back, and sometimes they agree. Well, maybe most of the time they agree, but sometimes they don't. I've had critics say, "This is the worst paper I ever read, and I hope it never gets published." And indeed, that paper did get published, and it was used as evidence in uh, congressional hearings on international bribery. So I run into disagreements, and I enjoy those because we get to, on both sides, load up the evidence that we can to support our opinion. And so I've been relatively successful in that.
Now, do you worry about what people may think about your opinions or views, or do you worry about kind of the negativity that some people might bring when they read um, these issues in your books?
Not really. I mean, I'm trained. The motto of the University of California is "Let there be light," and our job is to tell the truth. That's our job. That's why people like Kissinger and Nixon, well, politicians generally don't tell the truth very often. If you ask your readers, I may ask your audience if they go to political events in the next few months and there's a candidate there, one question you might ask any sitting candidate in Congress or wherever, it's a very simple question. You raise your hand and you say, do donations to your campaign influence your votes? They will all say no. because they'd be breaking the law and admitting to a crime if they said yes. But everybody knows that donations influence votes. Everybody knows that. But they'll lie to your face if you ask them the question face to face. So anyway, that's just some homework maybe for the upcoming elections. I can't. All I can do is listen to the arguments on the other side and uh, and try to understand them, and also to look for evidence to support one side or the other.
And kind of on the contrary, too, aside from your nonfiction work with um under one roof and the hidden front line, you've also been able to write children's books. And
Yeah.
children's books is kind of a huge, complete 180 from nonfiction, talking about these big, huge topics, and then you go to writing, little fantasy fictional children's books as well, which some can be nonfiction, but they're really much at a more tame volume when it comes to the words and verbiage that's used in them. Do you find it more difficult to write nonfiction or children's books more?
No, I enjoy writing so much. I don't think about things being difficult. Putting pen to paper is one of my favorite things to do. Obviously, we're using the word processing, but I enjoyed the squirrel book, The Great Squirrel Burglar. My wife kind of came up for the idea, then my sister, the artist, did all the artwork in it. But that book is really about multi-generational families and how they work. The main theme in the book, or the main story in the book, is this grandfather squirrel, like all squirrels do. He buried his nuts, but he can't remember where he put them. And so his daughter has his grandson help him look through the neighborhood to find his acorns and nuts. So one of the themes there is multi-generational collaboration. That fits right in with the other things. The other kid's book is a book of my photography. Um, my two websites that people might want to look at are grahamsbooks.com and grahamsgalleries.com. And there, I've had the good fortune to do a lot of traveling through work and vacation, and I take pictures as I go. I have a textbook, and there are about 40 different pictures I've taken in many countries to help explain differences in how things are marketed in other countries. I've also produced videotapes on helping Americans negotiate with Japanese or helping Americans negotiate with foreigners in general. And so all these media for me are interesting to work with. And again, I'm basically a teacher. And so I'm trying to entertain, but also educate at the same time.
Between your nonfiction and the children's books that you've come out with, what's been the overall reception that you've received so far from critics and from just everyday people that have read your books so far?
Well, people really seem to like the story in the squirrel book. It's animated. The squirrel is talking to dogs and cats and birds, and they just enjoy the story and find it poignant. That's their word, not mine. And the other kid's book is I asked people to compare pictures of that I've taken of different animals in other areas. So one of the pairs I asked them to compare is a tree and a couple of uh, sea lions. And the question is, what do these two have in common? What connects these two pictures? And some kids and grandparents, it's meant to bring kids and grandparents together. Um, some kids say, well, they both breathe. They're both near water. That's true. But my favorite answer of all is a word that connects both the trees and the sea lions is the word bark, because one has bark and one barks. And so that's the whole idea of the second children's book, comparing the photographs and seeing what connects them. And so I have fun with that, and I enjoy uh, showing that book to people and letting them make some guesses. Then in the back of that book, we have a bunch of potential answers.
So when people read your books and if people check them out, what is the overall message that you are wanting people to get or walk away from when they read your books?
Yeah, the fundamental message in all my work goes something like this, and I use it on my websites and in the books. The primordial persuasion was punishment. The first sophistication was exchange. And so, what made us humans was we exchanged things, not our ability to punish. And that works real well, for example, in international diplomacy. Now we have all these trade sanctions where the United States is punishing other countries. And one of the key themes of my work is trade causes peace. So if you stop trade, you're asking for trouble. And of course, that scene is unfolding big time in the Iran Strait of Hormuz mess that exists. Um, but the themes are really consistent across the books. Exchange is hugely important. Also, creativity is important. One of my favorite stories in the books, when I teach negotiation, or when anybody in the country teaches negotiation in business and law schools, oftentimes they'll tell the story, the parable of the orange, and I tell it in the context of my kids. I walk into the kitchen. My two daughters are fighting. I ask, what's the problem? And they say, well, there's only one orange and we both want it. So one approach is I go to the kitchen drawer, pull out a sharp knife and cut it exactly in half. And that's fair, right? But that's zero-sum negotiation or competitive negotiation. If I'm really smart, I'll ask a question. Uh, why do you kids want the orange? And if I'm lucky, one wants the skin to make marmalade and the other wants the meat to make juice. Then they both can get 100% of what they want. And that's the story as it's told in most courses of negotiation. That's the distinction between competitive negotiation and integrative bargaining. The latter, you ask questions. What we teach in inventive negotiation, or the parable works for inventive negotiation, a third approach. When I ask my daughters, I'll cut this in half, but why don't you kids plant an orange tree? And um, the two foundations of that book, Inventive Negotiation, are negotiation is a long-term relationship of creativity. And the best example is the apple we have in our pocket. That's, a 20-year relationship between about a dozen companies all over the world. And they're all participating in the creative process and improving that phone. Maybe too often, but very often.
Do you think some people are afraid to write about real topics?
Well, a lot of folks don't. Uh, oh, that's a tough question. A lot of folks don't like writing. For example, my artist sister, the reason we collaborate so well is she does the artwork and I do the writing. Writing for me is easy and fast, and I hope good. Uh, but you really are taking a risk putting things in black and white because people can criticize them and disagree. But I don't mind that. So I guess to answer your question, for some people it's not easy, but I have no idea what that's like because it is easy for me.
Well, John, thank you so much for taking time to come on the podcast today to share your books and share your story about kind of how you got these books published. I think it's important for people to hear about these topics because it's important for them to be able to see that you can have these open conversations and discussions and and I think it's a way for authors to not be afraid of holding back on maybe what they believe in and whatnot. So I appreciate you for coming on the podcast today. For people to check out your books if you would like people to follow you and support you on your journey. Where can they go to learn more information and where can they go to follow you?
Yeah, I'll just mention the website again. It's Graham's Books. That's one word, Grahams books.com. And that'll take you to all the books, including videos about them, about three of them. So you can take a look at all of them. And if you're interested in my photography, it's Graham's Galleries. Those galleries also include my sister's artwork.
And I will put all this information down in the description box in the show notes below. So just feel free to go down below and check those out and find all that information there. Feel free to follow the podcast on the socials. You can reach out to me on Instagram and TikTok at southern.reads. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Noah's Podcast. And you can also check out my website, noahspodcasts.com, to learn more about this show as well as the other podcasts that I do. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your day. Be safe, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Southern Reads.